On July 26th, Kennard takes the stage.
Now, I know many of you anticipate walking across the stage tonight with your check.
Then he drops a bombshell. He says there won't be any payouts.
But you won't be tonight walking across the stage with your check.
The whole place was in pandemonium, and many preachers were crying, many were angry.
How many of you judging me right now? If you judging me, you're judging God.
But pastors try to keep the hope alive.
Faith is reaching out into nothing, grabbing hold to just something and waiting for it to manifest.
While church leaders head home empty-handed, Kennard and his entourage take a trip to Disney World.
He spent around $6,000 and had a great time at Disney World after he just destroyed the hopes of all these pastors.
You get sick in your stomach to know that you've been, deceived and you've been used to deceive someone else. You really get angry.
When I kept hearing the delays, when I kept listening to the conference calls, that's when I got suspicious that something is wrong here.
We began receiving calls from churches who had invested money with Mr. Kennard. We've invested this money. We're not getting our money. Please help us.
In July of 2002, FBI Special Agent Tim Coakley takes the case and begins looking into Abraham Kennard's investment program.
There was thousands of people calling him, wanting their money back or demanding their grant money.
Coakley suspects Kennard is operating a fraud and that hundreds of churches have been victimized. On January 29, 2003, FBI agents raid Kennard's Georgia estate. They seize boxes of bank statements and business records. What they cannot find is any proof of wealthy investors backing the program.
We were unable to find any investors. We found many representations made by him that he had investors. We found videotaped evidence of him claiming there were investors. Put all of that information together, and you have a clear-cut case of fraud.
Investigators discover that in less than 2 years, Abraham Kennard conned more than 1,600 churches out of about $9 million.
We did the math, and it would have been over $1 billion to pay what he promised he would pay.
Of the $9 million he took in, Kennard handed out just $1.3 million back to pastors during church meetings. The rest of the money was used to fund his lavish lifestyle, including 23 vehicles and property in Georgia.
He operated on that money. He lived on that money. He bought a lot of cars and toys with that money.
And very proud of it, taking pictures of himself on beds covered in $100 bills, traveling by limousine, traveling to Las Vegas, traveling to the Bahamas, taking cruises.
He had a party. He brought boats. He was flying first class. He scammed a lot of good people.
Investigators also discover Kennard is an ex-con and has tried to run similar schemes before.
And it wasn't until he put God behind this and the religious theme that it ever worked. And gaining the trust of some well-respected pastors and getting them to believe in him is how this thing took off.
In January of 2004, Kennard is charged with money laundering and mail fraud. Authorities prepare to make the arrest. But when American Greed returns, investigators discover the false prophet is nowhere to be found, and the hunt is on. After 5 weeks on the run, a tip leads authorities to the small town of Okolona, Mississippi. On February 24th, the Tupelo Police Department and the FBI SWAT team prepare to make the arrest.
I was able to track them and their movements, but I was always about a day or two behind.
After 5 weeks on the run, a tip leads authorities to the small town of Okolona, Mississippi. On February 24th, the Tupelo Police Department and the FBI SWAT team prepare to make the arrest.
We drove up to the residence and our team exited our vehicle and we took a position of cover. behind some of our vehicles. And Mr. Kennard came out with his hands up, making sure that we knew that there was no threat involved.
The game is finally up for Abraham Kennard.
It was very quiet. He did not resist, and they took him into custody and took him back to Atlanta.
1 year later, Abraham Kennard stands trial for fraud. From the beginning, he sidelines his court-appointed attorney.
Abraham Kennard gave his own opening statement and at one point looked at the jury and said that the government was trying to hang him on the cross, and he put his arms up like this.
And Pastor John Payton is one of 17 church leaders to take the stand.
He would always claim he was in the spirit. It's almost like he was going to blame God for anything he did. God led me to do that. God told me to say that.
After cross-examining a half-dozen witnesses, Kennard puts the case back into his attorney's hands.
His claim was that he did not do the things that he did with the goal or notion of trying to victimize these ministries, these people. He truly intended to try and assist and help them. And it was in large measure the government's intervention in freezing his accounts that prevented him from completing his goals.
It's an argument that's difficult to make.
We had more evidence in this case than I've ever had in any case in a 20-year law enforcement career.
I want you to know, beloved.
The smooth-talking swindler can't preach his way out of this one. On February 7th, 2005, the jury convicts Abraham Kennard of 116 counts, including mail fraud, money laundering, and income tax evasion. He's sentenced to 17 years in prison and ordered to pay nearly $8 million in restitution. But Kennard's victims will see very little of their investment return.
The people that relied on him did so because they had faith in God, and most of them needed that money desperately and saw him as, in effect, their savior.
Mighty, mighty, mighty good. So
Donald Downing put his trust in Kennard, but the 10 churches Downing recruited put their trust in him. And today, he's lost more than money.
you can't put a price in losing a friend. Every pastor that I brought in no longer talked with me.
The strong bond that once tied this pastoral brotherhood together now seems strained. But they say their faith in God remains steadfast.
We're Christians, so we're supposed to forgive. We're supposed to love in spite of. So who am I to actually harbor unforgiveness in my heart over a situation that the government has already stepped in and rendered punishment?
But for many, the betrayal runs deep, and not all of Kennard's victims are ready to forgive.
He betrayed his own people. He ripped off his own neighborhood. He took from those who already didn't have much.
Can you say amen on Sunday?
Anybody who will steal from the church, I don't care what color they are. I don't care if they're a pastor or a pauper. Anybody who will steal for the church, I believe there's a special place in hell for them. That's what I believe.